With no disrespect intended to this guy, okay, with just a little bit of disrespect intended to this guy, what did ancient civilizations really think about the potential for alien life? It's kind of a weird question. Let's answer it. The short answer is not that much, but a little bit, kinda. Don't worry. We'll get into it. Before we get into it, no, aliens did not build the pyramids. No, aliens did not build Stonehenge. No, I was not there. Yes, I'm sure. No, I'm not going to answer how I can be so sure. Yes, I believe aliens exist. No, I do not believe they have ever visited Earth. In the ancient world, the idea of other worlds beyond Earth was, pardon the pun, actually don't pardon this pun, give it the punishment it deserves, kind of alien to their worldview for the most part. To explain, while the concept of a heliocentric universe that is with the sun at the center was conceived of at least as early as the 6th century BCE, it must be said that the geocentric model was dominant all the way up until the Renaissance. The reasons for this should be in some ways immediately obvious. Absent the existence of finely tuned observational equipment like telescopes, the ancients relied on their naked eye observations primarily to form their picture of the natural world. And to the naked eye, it certainly appears that the Earth sits stationary while the cosmos revolves around it. We can't feel the Earth moving after all, thankfully. Complex philosophies grew up around this naked eye observation, most notably that of the Greek Aristotle, who placed the Earth on the innermost sphere in a universe surrounded by other spheres, on which rotated the moon, sun, stars, and other planets. Those transparent crystalline spheres then rotated around the Earth and its 4 basic elements. It was the nature of Earth, dirt, rock, metal, etc., to seek the universal center, which was how they explained gravity. You probably see where this is going. If it's the nature of Earth, that is to say solid matter, to seek the center of the universe, well then there can't very well be other worlds out there away from that center. And how indeed can there be aliens if there are no worlds for them on which to arise? Oddly enough, pre-Aristotelians like Democritus can argue with me in the comments about that, and Epicurus were open to a multi-world theory. In their view, there were almost certainly other worlds out there, and they were almost certainly inhabited. Metrodorus of Chios thought the idea of our world being the only one as likely as if a single ear of wheat grew on a vast plain. That's not very likely. The Roman poet Lucretius also broke with Aristotle. He said, "Nothing in the universe is unique and alone, and therefore in other regions there must be other Earths, inhabited by different tribes of men and breeds of beasts." Now that's a very interesting comment, but perhaps there's a bit of a language barrier here. Did Lucretius imagine these men as humans on other worlds, or something different? It's very tough to say. But while there were those in antiquity willing to entertain the idea, Aristotle's conception was by far the dominant framework. Writing 400 years after Aristotle's time, Pliny the Elder echoed Aristotle's sentiment. Quote, "It is madness to argue that there are innumerable other worlds, and that we must believe there to be so many other natures, or that there will be so many suns and so many moons, and that each of them will have immense trains of other heavenly bodies. It is madness, perfect madness, to go out of this world and search for what is beyond it, as if one who is ignorant of his own dimensions could ascertain the measure of anything else, or as if the human mind could see what the world itself cannot contain." So, tantalizingly, Pliny hints perhaps at the idea of a multiverse theory, and definitely hints at the idea of extrasolar planets, which we only started discovering in the 1990s. But he also says that it's completely pointless to think about them. So because they were so heavily influenced mostly by Aristotle, ancient people mostly wouldn't have considered the idea of other worlds and other inhabited planets beyond our solar system. But what about from our solar system? Well, let's talk about Lucian of Samosata. Lucian was a satirist first and foremost, a Hellenized Syrian who probably spoke Syriac as a first language, but he wrote in ancient Greek. Think of him as a 2nd century Douglas Adams. He mocked many sacred cows in his society and was massively influential in the development of Western literature, inspiring such luminaries as Thomas More, Jonathan Swift, and William Shakespeare. So if he's a 2nd century Douglas Adams, let's talk about his Hitchhiker's Guide, a true story, or as an alternate translation, true history. Alethe Diegmata, or in Latin Vira Historia, tells the story of a group of sailors, among them Lucian himself, who sail out past the Straits of Gibraltar and end up having their ship taken to the moon by an errant whirlwind. There they get embroiled in a war between the King of the Moon and the King of the Sun over which side will get to colonize Venus. Now, this war features an air force of 50,000 giant mosquitoes ridden by archers and stalk mushrooms that use their mushroom caps as shields and asparagus as spears. Yes, apparently VeggieTales is a couple thousand years old. The story features a whale 27 miles long, complete with a whole ecosystem inside its belly. Shades of Terry Pratchett there, perhaps. Now, true history is a wonderful, remarkable document, maybe my favorite document ever from antiquity. I think this story absolutely meets the criteria of science fiction, though many scholars do disagree. And even if Lucian is mocking the gullible travel writers and exaggerating historians of his own day, and bear in mind the narrator just straight up tells you he is lying, this seems to be clearly a depiction of aliens to me. While the flora and fauna Lucian and his compatriots encounter are foreign and alien, the kings of the sun and the moon, Phaethon and Endymion respectively, are human beings. Each characters in mythology tied respectively again to the sun and the moon. And again, it must be said, Lucian is mocking the writers of his own day who would uncritically report such odd things in their own writings. But they would do so apparently seriously, unlike Lucian. Lucian was not the only ancient writer to imagine looking down on Earth from a great height, by the way. Plato and Cicero both imagined a form of space travel. Cicero wrote of Scipio Aemilianus having a dream where his grandfather Africanus carried him to a great enough height where he could see the 9 concentric circles of the spheres, and he could hear their music. The point of this story isn't really outer space, though he does have a line about the pinpoint of the Earth, i.e. its insignificance, that brings to mind Carl Sagan's famous pale blue dot. Perhaps not surprisingly, as science grew as a discipline and scholars began to separate the various disciplines of knowledge into their modern, separate, distinct categories, people began to ponder the idea of alien life gradually more and more. Perhaps counterintuitively, the original impetus for this was in fact Christianity. Right up until the late 13th century, people pretty much kept to the Aristotelian line that there wouldn't naturally be more than one Earth-like heavenly body. But in the late 1200s, Parisian Bishop Etienne Tempier said no, God can create as many worlds as he wants to. The penalty for sticking with Aristotle's logic after that point was excommunication, so again, perhaps unsurprisingly, religious men suddenly went, yeah, there's totally lots of other worlds out there, just like we always said. In the 15th century, Nicholas of Cusa said, no, Aristotle, there's probably actually a multitude of worlds out there. And in the early 16th century, Giordano Bruno said, actually, there's probably infinity of worlds out there populated by intelligent life. Not long after, Copernicus' heliocentric model replaced the long-standing geocentric model from all the way back in Aristotle and Ptolemy. And the late 17th century Dutch scientist Christian Huygens commented, a man that is of Copernicus' opinion, that this Earth of ours is a planet, like the rest of the planets, cannot but sometimes think that it's not improbable that the rest of the planets have their inhabitants as well. After that, of course, following the Industrial Revolution and the introduction and widespread use of telescopes, the depictions of and interest in aliens would only grow. Really exploding after Edwin Hubble showed us that the universe is much, much larger than Aristotle and company could have ever dreamed. Even just in my own lifetime, I've seen interest in the concept kind of wax and wane. I remember the 90s when I was a kid, where you had not only the X-Files, but also like multiple TV specials about UFOs and potential government cover-ups. Maybe it's that I was a child, but I remember this palpable sense that the government was probably hiding some alien activity. In conclusion, we have occasional spotty evidence of ancient people thinking about and talking about aliens, though only rarely did they include some imaginary depiction of what they might look like. Human beings really began to consider the concept after the astronomical advances of the early modern era, and especially with the onset of the Industrial Revolution. But way back in the ancient world, there was that handful of thinkers who were far ahead of their time. This, of course, was just a handful of examples I found of ancient writers pondering the idea of aliens. I don't pretend this list is comprehensive, especially given that my background is in the history of Europe. I don't doubt there are documents from Asia, the Middle East, and Africa pondering the existence of alien life in other worlds. I just haven't personally studied those cultures very much, so I don't know about them. If I missed anything, I'm always happy to be educated. Just let me know in the comments. Until next time, guys, this has been Long History Short. I am the world-renowned historian. Be good, kiddos. Peace out.